with lesson 5 in area and perimeter. So we've kind of focused on perimeter up until now, and now we're going to switch our focus and talk a little bit more about area. So in your books, you need to be on page 779, and it says you can find the area of a rectangle on a grid by counting the number of unit squares. So remember, unit squares are how many squares are inside of a shape that don't overlap. So this one has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 unit squares, okay? If a rectangle is not on a grid, so that means if you have a shape like this that doesn't have squares in it, you can do it yourself. And that is called tiling. And that's what we're gonna practice today, okay? So the dimensions of a rectangle are its length and width. Length is how long it is, width is how wide it is. So let's practice that. Okay, they give us a really nice example. It says, find the area of the rectangle at the right by tiling it. So you tile the rectangle by separating it into unit squares. So that means we're going to draw vertical and horizontal lines to cut it into squares. Draw unit squares on the rectangle so that the length of the rectangle is 8 unit squares and the width is 3 unit squares, okay? So we've been practicing this. We talked a lot about this with arrays. If I want to have 8 columns, how many lines will I draw? Right, 7. We always draw one less line than the number of spaces we want to have. We did it with our arrays. We talked about it with fractions on a number line. So if I want this to have 8 parts, I'm going to draw 7 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. If I wanted to have 3 rows, how many lines will I draw? 2. I always draw one less. So 1, 2. So we just tiled that shape. That's all it is drawing lines to make little squares inside the shape. Okay? Then to figure out the area of the shape, you count the total number of unit squares. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. So after we tiled that shape, there were 24 unit squares, okay? So that means that the area is 24 square units, okay? However many squares are inside of a shape is the area. So tiling the rectangle results in an array. Do you remember that from multiplication? That's all we're doing. We're kind of using what we've already learned to learn a new skill. Okay, the array has 3 rows and 8 columns. So find 3 times 8, that's 24. I could also get my answer that way, okay? We're actually going to talk more about that way tomorrow. Today, I mostly want you to focus on tiling, okay? So, what I'd like for you to do is take a look at this question. It says, what do you notice about the product of 3 times 8? Remember, product means answer. And the total number of unit squares tiled in the rectangle. So we had 24 squares in the rectangle. 3 times 8 equals 24. Same number, okay? So kind of tuck that in the back of your brain, and like I said, we're going to talk more about it tomorrow. Okay, go ahead and turn your page. And let's look at this example. Find the area of the rectangle at the right by tiling it, okay? So you tile the rectangle by separating it into unit squares. Draw unit squares in the rectangle so the length is 6 units and the width is 5. Okay, so what that all, that's kind of like a lot of words to say. Let's draw horizontal and vertical lines. So if I want to have 6 columns, how many lines will I draw? 5. Okay, and if I want to have 5 rows, how many lines will I draw? 4. Good, and don't worry if it's not exactly perfect. As long as you're able to see and count all the squares, that's the most important thing. So count the total number of unit squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, hey, I can count by 5s. That's easier. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So that means there are 30 unit squares. Okay, if there's 30 unit squares, then that means the area is 30 square units. I know that's kind of confusing. A unit square is just one of these squares that we tile. When we say square units, that's telling us how big it is. I know that's a little confusing. All right, tiling the rectangle gives me an array, just like with multiplication. Okay, the array has 5 rows and 6 columns. If we think about that as a multiplication fact, like we did with our arrays, then I would have 5 times 6, and that equals 30. Okay, again, so the product of my multiplication fact and the number of squares are the same. Okay, it's kind of a way that you can check yourself. But again, I say, I really want you to focus on tiling, making the array. All right, so that's what you're going to do today. You are going to practice making some arrays and tiling different shapes. Have fun.